The only little glimmer is that over the past about 6 weeks, the Ukrainians have actually gained some ground. What happened was that Elon Musk turned off his Starlink satellite service to the areas that the Russians control. And the Russians were using it for command and control for their troops. And this meant they couldn't communicate with each other. And the Ukrainians took the advantage and have actually gained a few miles, square miles of territory. And the Russians are still losing a huge amount of men, faster apparently than they can even recruit them. So if they were feeling that pressure, then the compromise could at least be discussed. But again, sadly, I still don't see it.
So talks in Geneva covering, well, the crisis in Iran as well as the Ukraine war. We're going to catch up on what is going on there now. Just a little further, more on the Iranian crisis in just a moment, but on Ukraine, President Donald Trump aboard Air Force One, well, he said, well, the stakes are very high.
Well, they're big talks. It's going to be very easy. I mean, look, so far, Ukraine better come to the table fast. That's all I'm telling you.
So let's get the thoughts of Tim Marshall then, who's joined me live. Hi to you, Tim.
Hello there, John.
Hi, welcome as always. So on Ukraine, Tim, before we get into what the talks won't accomplish, or there's no sign of them accomplish, what can they accomplish? There will be discussion on humanitarian affairs, won't there, like exchanges of prisoners?
Yes. Well, let's hope they can get an exchange of prisoners and some humanitarian corridors opened. But it's interesting that both sets of talks are happening in Geneva today. But this is, I think, the substantive one, whereas the Iranian one isn't. I mean, it's Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner for the Americans, and they're there for both of the talks. They're leading both of the talks. But the Iranian one's, I don't know, it's a couple of hours at the most. The Ukrainian ones is a couple of days.
Yeah.
And so hopefully they can agree some humanitarian stuff and then move on to the substance. And that's where the problems will come again, because I can see the substance there. I can even see the compromises that the Ukrainians are signaling. I'm just not sure that the Russians are going to go for the compromises. Yes. And of course, Mr. Trump says it's down to the Ukrainians. Not everybody agrees with that.
Indeed, and that is such a key qualification here. If anyone is hoping for good news out of the talks on the Ukraine war, maybe they shouldn't be holding their breath, because it is very clear from what we have seen, all that we have seen, Tim, isn't it, that the Russian side, they are in the business of not doing a deal. They want to keep on talking for the sake of appearance to keep on talking, but the terms they are setting down, they do not really vary, and they're generally, time and time again, just unacceptable to the Ukrainian side.
Yeah. It's Groundhog Day again, isn't it, John? I mean, we've been here before, and in fact, I would say over the last 2 years, the sticking points are pretty much what they are now. I mean, there's things such as the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. Both sides want it. I mean, it's in Ukraine. There's no question about that. But the Russians are sticking out saying, no, we have to control it in the long run. Where the Ukrainians are hinting that they will compromise is that, okay, we'll freeze the front lines. We will both then pull back X miles, creating this buffer zone between us, and it will be frozen. And then in the long term, we can try and sort it all out. But the Russians aren't going to go for that.
Yes.
And the big problem, as it always is that the Russians have spent thousands and thousands of their young men's lives trying to capture the 20% of the Donbass that they haven't yet captured. This is where the fortified cities are. This is where, if the Ukrainians gave them away, as they're being asked to, means that the way is then wide open to the capital, Kyiv, yes. And so they can't. And that's where we're going to get stuck again.
Right. I mean, Zelensky and his team then, Tim, because we heard him there in Munich, are saying that, look, give us 2 months and we can have even a presidential election.
Yeah.
And the idea is on the table, isn't it, now that Ukraine would be willing to put a peace deal to a referendum. But you need a peace deal to do that, and you need a ceasefire to have an election. And the terms that are being offered by Russia allow for neither of those things. So surely the Ukrainian effort now is just to demonstrate the futility of the talking that's going on, and hope that, you know, the Europeans, I think they do get the hint, but the Europeans take the hint very clearly, and maybe even Donald Trump, which is less likely, and put the pressure on Russia that's needed to make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, there is some, wild hope that the compromise could bring something today or well, more likely tomorrow, but that's unlikely.
But what sort of
Again,
compromise would that be, Tim? Today or tomorrow or the day after?
the Ukrainians, who are the ones who would make the concession that we accept de facto that you have got this territory. You've got 80% of the Donbass,
Yeah.
you've got Crimea, and de facto, we accept it. And there's ways of signaling in your language
Yes.
that you kind of realize that that's not ever going to change. I mean, there's a difference between de facto and de jure, where you recognize it as an international boundary, but de facto. And so the Russians have won 80% of the Donbass. But the second sticking point, let's say even if the Russians by some miracle did say tomorrow, yeah, you know what, we will freeze it here and we will draw back a few miles. But what we won't do, this is point 2 of the compromise, we won't allow Western troops to come and monitor this.
Yes.
So, you've got to get past those 2 giant hurdles. And at the moment, I don't see how it is. The only little glimmer is that over the past about 6 weeks, the Ukrainians have actually gained some ground. What happened was that Elon Musk turned off his Starlink satellite service to the areas that the Russians control. And the Russians were using it for command and control for their troops. And this meant they couldn't communicate with each other. And the Ukrainians took the advantage and have actually gained a few miles, square miles of territory. And the Russians are still losing a huge amount of men, faster apparently than they can even recruit them. So if they were feeling that pressure, then the compromise could at least be discussed. But again, sadly, I still don't see it, which brings us to, well, what then happens if Trump is so impatient? Well, the war grinds on and, spring comes and the fighting becomes more intense. And the Europeans have to continue to step up. And they are signaling they will. The British, for example, I think late last week or over the weekend signaled that there's X £100 million more going into the defence of Ukraine over this year.
Okay, can we turn to Iran now? Because, I mean, also in Geneva, there were these talks, American and Iranian sides at the table. And as you say, Witkoff and Jared Kushner, they're sort of just doubling up on the Ukraine front and then now the Iranian front as well. But again, it just went on for a couple of hours. And it's a kind of, tense, frozen situation. So much American firepower off the coast of Iran, ready to unleash, enormous firepower. And the Iranians, maybe do you reckon? I guess it's in one sense, it's an impossible question. What's going on in the mind of the Iranian leadership? But there is some speculation that they believe they could take a short strike, that they believe America doesn't have the stomach for a long conflict.
Well, that's quite the gamble, isn't it? And you're right, we can't read inside their minds, but it does look pretty clear to me that they're playing for time. But the Americans have time. For once, and that's because they've already got a complete aircraft carrier strike group. That's both the aircraft carrier and all the ships that then are around it and the submarines underneath it. They've moved the extra planes into Jordan from Lakenheath in the UK. Interestingly, they have moved a lot of refueling planes. And then the last bit of this jigsaw is that the USS Gerald Ford, which is their biggest and most powerful aircraft carrier, has left the Caribbean and is chugging its way, well, it's nuclear powered, it's chugging its way towards the Gulf. And in about 10 days' time, they will have 2 carrier strike groups. So if the Iranians are saying they could absorb a short strike, what the Americans are signaling with the refueling and the 2 carrier groups is that this wouldn't be like last year, the 12-day war, when we joined in and bombed the nuclear facilities. This would be much. I think if this happens, we're talking weeks and weeks.
Really, yeah.
And the Iranians may not be able to absorb that. And so that's going to concentrate their minds. The reason that today was so short is that both sides know they have that time. They have a couple of weeks Because what the Iranians are saying is we will only discuss the nuclear issue. We're not going to talk about our long-range ballistic missiles and reducing the capacity to fire them and how far they go. And we're not going to talk about all our proxy militias around the Middle East. We're only talking about that. So Arakchi, the foreign minister, ended today, said we have reached an understanding on the main guiding principles, which is code for whatever it is they're going to talk about. What we have not yet got, John, from today is what is in those guiding principles. Does it include the missiles and the proxy groups, or is it only about, we'll give you the sanctions relief, you will stop enriching uranium and ship all your stuff out of the country?
All right, Tim Marshall, a pleasure and so interesting to talk to you as always. Thank you.
Thank you.